Well, welcome everyone to today's ServiceNow Process Mining Jumpstart series session. This is the fourth and final session in this series targeted at customers who are entitled to our in-platform process mining solution, but haven't really started to take advantage of it fully yet. In our first session, we introduced the topic of process mining, what it is, why it's important. In the second session, we looked at the building blocks of a process mining project and walked through the creation of our first couple of projects together. In the last session, we went through all of the different aspects of the analyst workbench and the different capabilities that help you explore your process data and identify improvement opportunities. And finally, today, we're going to start discussing some of the common use cases or initial types of analysis that we see customers using process mining for. The purposes of these sessions is to help us all get a little bit better educated on ServiceNow's process mining capabilities, how the sessions are structured or how they work. We have this scheduled topic that we usually cover for the first 30, 40 minutes or so. And then as I go through the content, just post your questions in the Q&A and we'll do our best to address them either during the session or at the end. And if we can't answer them today, we usually post the answers to the community site. This is the slide that says, hey, anything we say and do here today can't be held against us in the court of law. It is also the slide that says, hey, as part of these conversations, if we happen to make any forward-looking statements about things that may be coming on future releases, you should take them as forward-looking statements, make no purchasing decisions based on them because they're always subject to change, or things are always subject to change. And I'm assuming at this point, you've all read the fine print. Who am I? My name is Dan Grady. I'm part of the product team here at ServiceNow that is focused on our process mining solution. And what we'll do today is we'll just do our quick little process mining 101 refresher for those that might be joining us for the first time. And then we'll run through the different use cases and slides to get the juices flowing and kind of give you some ideas. And then we'll jump into a demo and walk through some of those use cases in action. Unfortunately, I don't have demo data to support all of them, but we'll do the ones that we can just so you can get a feel for what it might look like in your own instances. We'll get your questions answered and we'll wrap up with some other resources that are available to you above and beyond what we cover here today. Now, I always like to start these sessions with this quote: do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And why I like the quote is it aligns to the reason that we've all gathered to learn a little bit more about the ServiceNow platform, then take that knowledge, go back, apply it at our own organizations and help us get more value out of our investment with ServiceNow. And it also aligns to the solution that we're talking about, process mining, which is designed to help us automate that process of X-raying our workflows and starting to show us where and how we could be doing better for everyone involved with them. Now, as always, we'll just start with the quick process mining 101 for the newcomers. So with everything we do, there's a designed and desired path in our minds for how it should work and how things should play out, whether that be planning an event like this webinar series or a business process or workflow. And when we design things, we design for both efficiency as well as completeness, to provide the best experience possible for as many people as possible. Now, unfortunately, what we design isn't always what ends up happening in reality, right? The reality is not all the work is going to be flowing through the optimal path, and that's going to have a negative impact on both the people that are trying to request service are having, as well as the people that are trying to deliver that service. Identifying what's actually happening within our processes and then improving them, though, isn't always easy and obvious. What process mining allows us to do is use the audit log data that is generated as records move through a given workflow. And we use that audit log data to create a visual representation of what's actually happening within a given process. And this new level of visibility helps us accelerate our ability to identify inefficiencies, non-conformant process activities, and ultimately improvement opportunities. Process mining gives us the ability to answer process questions that have historically been pretty challenging to answer. So where traditional analytics will allow us to answer a lot of the what style questions about our processes, process mining helps us answer some of the whys. So things like, where is the process getting stuck? Where is there unnecessary rework happening? Where are incidents, cases, tickets of some sort ping-ponging between different groups? And where aren't we conforming to the process that we designed? These are all things that have historically been difficult to answer and act upon, and now they're available to us in a couple of clicks. We like to say that process mining is going to help you get to the why behind all of your KPIs. And in doing so, help us empower everyone involved in the process to make data-driven decisions about which improvements to make. All right, let's get to the use cases. So we've covered in prior sessions how to create projects, and then we went through all the different capabilities in the analyst workbench. In this session, we put both of those together, and so we can look at specific ways to do certain types of analysis, like analyzing which types of cases or incidents are going to an on-hold state more than others, or for longer periods of time, or which types of cases are consistently going through multiple hops or teams, or perhaps we used process mining to identify a process improvement opportunity. Now we've acted on it and we want to see the impact, and if there's any adverse effects of that process change that we made. For each of the use cases that we're going to cover here today, there's a full article and post and recording on the community site in the process mining use case series. So we've got this session here today, but after today, if you want to go back or share with others what you've learned, go out to the community site and you'll find the process mining use case series there, and you'll find individual recordings for each of the ones we cover. All right, first one. On hold and on hold reason analysis is probably one of the most popular use cases we see customers start with. So if you think about it from a service delivery perspective, putting a piece of work into an on hold state can have both positive and negative impacts. On the positive side, right, it allows us or the support team to temporarily prioritize and address more urgent issues, right, potentially improving overall response times for critical matters. However, it can also lead to negative consequences, as customers may perceive it as a delay in resolution, causing frustration and hurting your CSAT scores or ESAT scores. Now, effective communication with the customer about the reason for placing the case on hold and providing realistic expectations for resolution is crucial to mitigate these negative effects and maintain good customer relations. Process mining can help organizations get visibility and provide an understanding of the bottlenecks so they can reduce the frequency and the duration of work in the on-hold state. So to do this type of analysis, what you'll do is you create a project with state as your activity definition. Then you can use the histogram to identify situations where work is going into on hold more than once, or a transition filter to isolate work that is sitting in the on-hold state for longer periods of time. And then alternatively, and this is one of my favorite use cases, we can create a project that includes the on-hold reason as an activity definition, in addition to the state activity definition. And this allows us to focus in on specific on-hold reasons. And what we'll do a little bit later on today is we'll walk through how you actually not only use a project that has on-hold reason, but we'll create this project in the demo portion as well. Now, my favorite use case, and this is I love the on-hold one, and that seems to be customers' favorites, but mine happens to be this multi-hop analysis example. I like to call this the finger-pointing report. So when we design a workflow, we design for both completeness and efficiency to ensure that everyone involved has an optimal experience, right? And as part of the design of a workflow, we'll likely build in the ability to reassign work to the appropriate team to ensure that the tasks get completed successfully. Now, even if reassignments are part of the design of a process, they can be time-consuming and impact overall productivity. So anything we can do to reduce the number of reassignments or how efficiently they are handled is a plus from an organizational perspective. So process mining can be used to help us get a better understanding of how often certain reassignments are happening, which handoffs are taking longer than others, and where do we have those dreaded ping pong situations where things are going back and forth between different teams? So to do this type of analysis, we create a project that has both assignment group and active as your activity definitions, and this will ensure that we get the full duration values that we want for our analysis. And then we can start to use the variation analysis to isolate those multi-hop situations. Just so you're aware, if this is your first time joining us, we created this very specific project as part of the second session that we had out there. And to refresh your memory, you can always go out and check out the recording. It's on the community in the first Process Mining Academy session. And I'll point everyone at the end of the session to where those recordings are posted. Now, one of the many things that makes process mining different than your more traditional reporting and analytics is the ability to use the steps or transitions within the life cycle of a piece of work to identify opportunities. So for example, one interesting way to look for self-service opportunities or potential routing or staffing issues would be to focus on pieces of work that take a long time to get to the in-progress state, but then take a relatively short time to get to the resolved or closed state. So to do this type of analysis, you can create a project with state as your activity definition. And then you use the transition filter capability to look for work that, let's say, takes longer than 2 days to move from new to in progress, but then less than 2 hours to move from in progress to resolved. Like there's got to be some self-service opportunities in that set of work that's out there. A really powerful way to look for opportunities. And obviously those time thresholds, you can adjust them based on your organization and the data that you're looking at. Now, approval bottleneck analysis. I love this one. Now, approvals are an important part of certain business processes, but they can also disrupt the efficient execution of processes and extend task completion times. So to mitigate these issues, organizations should focus on optimizing approval processes within the platform. Maybe set clear SLAs for approvals, automate routine decisions, and improve it's nice to improve communications and transparency among users and approvers out there. Process mining can provide visibility into those situations where the approval step of the process is causing significant delays, so we know where we might want to make some adjustments to that approval process. A very common example, I have pretty much every customer that I work with that want to start looking at their approval steps and their processes. Now, we could do the approval analysis simply by setting up a project on the requested item table. But to really do it well, you'll want to set up a multi-dimensional map, with one table being the requested item table, with both state and approval as your activity definitions. And then you'll want to add a second table of SE tasks as the child of the requested items, and use state as your activity definition in that SE task table setup. And then you're also going to add both short description and items as your breakdown in that SE task table configuration. And what this allows us to do is identify where in the process we're losing time. Is it the approval step, or is it within the fulfillment tasks themselves? Unfortunately, I don't have great demo data to show you this one live today, but it's a very strong use case for customers. And there's a recording on the Process Mining use case series on the community site that walks us through this entire process. All right, SLA breach analysis. So SLAs can be used across the organization, departments like HR, facilities, and IT. The intention of an SLA is to provide the customer with an expectation of service, so within a known timescale and the ability to monitor when the service levels are not being met. Most organizations have some form of KPI or metrics that help them understand their SLA performance, like what percentage of the work is breaching SLAs and which categories or types of tickets miss their SLAs most often. But where organizations tend to struggle is getting a better understanding of why this work is missing the targeted SLA. Process mining can be used to help analyze the work that breached SLAs and help you isolate inefficiencies in the process. So you can approach this analysis in two ways. You can use the condition builder when you create your project to isolate only the breached work. Or, and this is probably the better way to do this, is to use the conditions option in the project, kind of on the workbench itself, the analyst workbench itself, to isolate the data. And why we'd want to do it that second way is to kind of mine all the data and then use the conditions on the workbenches. That way you have the ability to save as a filter set and do some comparison analysis between the work that's breached SLA and the work that hasn't breached SLAs. Really, the trick with this use case is that you'll likely need to use the related list option on the condition builder, whether it's at the project setup state or on the workbench itself, to isolate the data that you need. Now, the next one is kind of this twofold here. And this is, we're talking about reprioritized work, but it also works for categorization as well. So if you think about it, wrongly prioritizing an IT incident can have negative consequences for an organization, right? When IT incidents are not correctly prioritized, it can lead to a whole bunch of problems that may affect business operations, customer satisfaction, and overall productivity. And to mitigate the impact of wrongly prioritizing IT tickets, companies should establish clear and well-defined incident prioritization processes. Regular review and improvement of these prioritization processes can ultimately contribute to a better incident handling and overall organizational resilience. Process mining can be used to analyze work that is being reprioritized. So to do this type of analysis, you create a project with priority as your activity definition. And then you can use the variation analysis capability in the workbench to look for situations where work is being wrongly prioritized. You can also do this with categories as well. So instead of using priority as your activity definition, you can use your category as an activity definition, and you can look at how things are being recategorized inside of the organization. I have a number of customers that have tried to do that because the category of the incident or ticket dictates where things are being sent, and they want to clean up their categories and kind of make sure that from an intake perspective, things are getting categorized appropriately right up front. So just different way to look at the data. Typically, we always start out with those state and assignment group projects, but you certainly can apply activities like priority and category to help you better understand how work is moving through the organization or what's going on within the tickets themselves. Channel analysis is something you can do this with traditional reporting, but process mining takes it to another level. So if you think about it, self-service channels like Portal allow quick customer employee service. But unlike, let's say, a phone or a walk-up or a virtual agent chat experience, it's most likely a one-way communication. So, which makes intake more challenging. And not everyone knows how to describe their problem or what they need accurately or completely. So consequently, you've got a work that's created by self-services often has higher reassignments or more frequently requires us to go back to the requester for additional information. Now, these situations where additional information is required are pretty frustrating for the customer or the employee, and they have a negative impact on satisfaction scores as well as service team productivity. So to do this type of analysis, you basically create a project with state as your activity definition, and then channel or contact type. Customers kind of call the intake channel or contact type differently in their instances, but those are the two most common ones. Channel or contact types are the fields that I see. If you use that as one of your breakdowns, that helps you get an understanding of volume and velocity across the different channels. And then you can use the histogram to isolate work that is going to on hold or awaiting call or info state multiple times, and then see the impact on the different channels in the organization that you're accepting work from. This is useful for identifying opportunities to improve those intake experiences and eliminate some of that back and forth. All right, reopened work analysis. So most workflows provide the opportunity for an employee, customer, citizen, business partner, whoever it might be, to reopen a piece of work after it's been resolved if they're not satisfied with the response or if there's further action that's required. Now, regardless of the reason why the piece of work is reopened, this is probably not the optimal experience for the given stakeholder, which will impact our satisfaction metrics. And the fact that we didn't get it right the first time will also have a productivity impact. So all of this reopened work, it's valuable feedback and should be used to identify coaching opportunities, process improvements, or content quality updates, whether that be to our standard operating procedures, our run books, our knowledge articles, whatever it may be. So to do this analysis, you can create a project with state as your activity definition again, then use the transition filter to focus on work that is in the resolved state and then not followed directly by the closed state. Right, so it's going someplace else after it's resolved. And then you can use the histogram again to isolate work that's being reopened more than once. Now, last but not least, I was actually just showing this to a customer yesterday, and the response was, this is exactly what we need, right? Process mining is designed to help us get visibility into opportunities to improve our processes. But once we make those process improvements, how do we know if they're having the expected impact? And are those process changing having any adverse effect on other areas of the process? So you can use KPIs to track the impact of a process change on things like closure times and satisfaction scores. But getting visibility into adverse effects on other areas of process, that's going to require process mining. So we can use the condition filters to isolate work that closed prior to the process change, then save that as a filter set. Then we can use the condition builder to isolate work that has closed after a process change and save that as a filter set. Then we can use the comparison to look at them both side by side. This comparison feature, really powerful when you're doing your analysis. So using it to analyze the impact of a process change is one thing, but starting to get some metrics around, hey, things that closed and then went into the on-hold state versus things that didn't, and the impact of things moving to on-hold is another way that we can use the comparison feature. And we'll look at that here today in the demo portion. All right. So that was kind of the most common use cases that we see customers starting out with. Obviously, they're meant to, we just shared those in slides to get your juices flowing a little bit about, how you could start applying process mining inside of your organization. And now what I'll do is I'll just jump over into an instance and we'll look at some of those live. All right, I'm going to open up this incident state analysis project, right? This is a project that we created in a prior session in which we've set up state as our activity definition. So we're looking at how things are moving from state to state to state in the process and where there might be bottlenecks in those state transitions. The first thing we'll do is we'll just take a quick look at, how that channel analysis might work out, or where you might start your channel analysis journey here. So on the summary and insights page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look at some of my improvement opportunities that were generated by the content packs and the findings that we've configured. And I can see here I've got a bunch of incidents that are going into that state of awaiting caller info. So what I might want to do here is I'll just jump in and look at those 8,400 incidents that went into the state of awaiting caller info at least once. And we'll narrow the process map to just those. And then once I get my process map, which is showing me again those 8,406 incidents that touch the state of awaiting caller info at least once, I may want to start using my breakdowns to better analyze those, specifically the channel breakdown, right? And this could also be called contact type in your instance. And what we'll start to see is that the majority of these incidents that came in and went into the awaiting caller info state came in via self-service. Second on the list is portal, but then you see this email channel. Look at the average duration. I've got a whole additional week of time packaged up in incidents that came in via email and went into awaiting caller info. So I might want to start digging into that email channel and get a better understanding of anything we could do there to potentially improve that experience and reclaim some of that time. Now I can just bring this back to the start. Another way to do this analysis, right? And I'm using awaiting caller info here. You can do the same exact thing on the on hold state. Maybe we only want to focus in on those situations in which things are going into awaiting caller info multiple times. So we can click on that node here, and then we can use this histogram to say only focus in on those things in which an incident, in this case, goes into awaiting caller info more than 2 times, so 2 through 9, and apply this filter. And then that'll narrow it down to those multiples or situations in which it goes into awaiting caller info multiple times. And then I can start to see which channels that's happening most often for. Self-service seems like a situation that I might want to dig into a little bit deeper. So things coming in via self-service, going into awaiting caller info multiple times, that's a problem area. So I might want to dig deeper into this one. Or maybe I want to dig deeper into the situations in which things are coming in via the portal and going into awaiting caller info multiple times. So now I can narrow it down to those 242. And then, of course, what I can do at any point in time is I can always go out and then get the records in which we have situations and have that to continue the conversation or continue the analysis. So just a couple of different ways to do some sort of intake channel analysis, combination of the histogram on the state of awaiting caller info or on hold, along with a breakdown on the left-hand side of the screen. Now let's take a look at that reopened work. Like, how would we do a reopened work analysis? Well, one of the ways to start that is to use our transition filters down here in the lower left. And what we can do, and like I mentioned during the presentation portion of this, right, one of the things that makes process mining different is the ability to use steps within the process to help us start to filter out our data or filter our data. So I can come in here and I can say, hey, show me all the incidents in this case in which the state was resolved and then wasn't not directly followed by the state of closed, meaning it went somewhere else, right? Instead of going directly from resolved to closed, this work went someplace else after it moved into the resolved state. And what I can do here is this narrowed it down to 3,500 incidents that went into the state of resolved and that did not go next to the state of closed. And then I can do a couple of different things. One is I can come over here and I can maybe just look at this by category. Which incidents did this happen most often? I got reopened after they were resolved. And I can see the majority of them came in via IT or were categorized as IT business service. So maybe I want to focus in on that specific category of incidents that are being reopened after they go to resolved. I might want to use my bottleneck analysis here to look at what paths are things taking. So we can come in here and we can say resolved. And then a little trick is if you do this space with a dash, it gets all the things in which resolved was the first step in the transition. And I see a couple of interesting things here. Of those 1,700 incidents that were categorized as IT business service that got reopened, 1,300 of them don't even have a closed step at all. Like, is that the way that we design the process? If it's not, we might want to look into those. I can see I have some that are going from resolved to closed here. And then I've got different ways that things can be reopened. It looks like I have 215 of these that go from resolved back to assigned, and then another 208 that go from resolved back to in progress. Why do we have two different paths when things get reopened? So this bottleneck analysis can be really helpful and help us understand how the process is actually behaving versus how we've actually designed the process up front, and look for opportunities to improve it and maybe drive more conformance from a process perspective inside of the organization. Just a couple of different ways in which you can start looking at your reopened work. Now let's take a look at how we would do that use case around longer to route than resolve. And again, this is one of those situations you'll notice I use the transitions filtering a lot here. But we can come in here and we can say, hey, show me all the situations in which an incident comes in, gets set to the state of new. And we want to make sure that it's the first time it got set to the state of new. So we can use this occurrence options here to say, focusing on things that were new for the first time. And then we'll say, then they're eventually followed by the state of in progress. And then eventually followed by the state of resolved. So I've got this flow, look for things that go from new to in progress and eventually followed by resolve, but I also want to add in some time constraints. So in this case here, I want to focus in on these things that are taking longer than 2 days to go from new to in progress. But then once they get to the in progress state, I want to focus in on the ones that are taking less than 2 hours for us to actually do the work and resolve, right? So we're losing a chunk of time up front, waiting for the work to start. But once we get the work, or we start the work, it's really easy work to do. Like these totally should be self-service opportunities for us. So in this case here, we can narrow it down to the 299 specific situations in which that happened. And then maybe I want to look at the intake channel for these. And I can see that a chunk of these, more than half of these things that took longer than 2 days to get the work started, but then less than 2 days or 2 hours for us to resolve it, they're coming in via self-service. Like, how do we have a self-service option that's taking that long for us to start the work? So maybe we want to narrow it down to just focusing on those. And then, like always, if we wanted to, we can drill down and get to the detailed records behind these to see if there's any opportunities to improve that situation. Those time buckets of 2 hours, 2 days, completely configurable and obviously up to you, but they're very useful if you want to start looking for self-service opportunities and reclaiming large chunks of time from an organizational perspective. All right. Last one here in this state example that we want to look at is, let's look at that before and after a process change example. So what we can do is we can use this condition builder. So we've been using the transitions filters up until now to isolate different steps or paths that work has taken in the process, but you can also use conditions just like on the reporting engine to isolate the data. Now, let's say we have a situation here in which we made a process change on Halloween of 2019, and we want to understand how the process was performing before Halloween, and then look at how the process was performing after that process change on Halloween. So what we can do is we can use this filter criteria here to say, show me all the work, or get me all the work that closed before a certain date. And we'll come here, and I know my demo date is 2019, and we'll say October 31st. Great, and we'll apply this. And now that we've applied this, this is a pretty important step, right? Is we've isolated our data to these 17,000 incidents that closed prior to the process change. And what we want to do is we want to come in here, we want to save as a new filter set so we can use this as part of our comparison. And we'll call this jumpstart prior to process change. And we'll save that. And we'll clear. And now let's isolate the data to be after the process change. So we'll come in here to conditions. We'll say closed after. And I'll go back to my 2019. And we'll go to October 31st. And we'll apply this. And this will get me the 4,300 incidents that closed after that process change. And again, we'll save our filter set. And we'll say jumpstart after process change. Filter sets are super handy when you want to start doing this comparative analysis. And now that we've got both those filter sets, what we can do is we can say, clear all this. I'm going to apply my one filter set over here prior to process change on the left-hand side. I'm going to hit my compare button up here. I'm going to clear this filter set, and then I'm going to apply the after process change. So now I got side-by-side view of before and after my process change that I made, and I can use my comparison statistics to get an understanding of the impact of that process change. And it looks like here, I can see that after the process change, our average durations are down about 5 hours. So a success, if you will. But that side-by-side comparison, super useful. We did it here with before and after using condition builders, but it could be for any filter set that you want to set up. Maybe we'll do one now or in a little bit around isolating things that go into the on hold state. All right, now let's take a look at those assignment group analysis. So two different things here. My favorite one, we'll look at the finger pointing report. So in this project, what we've done is instead of state as our assignment group, state as our activity definition, we used assignment group as our activity definition. And we'll look at two different use cases in here. The first one is we'll use the variation analysis just to help us understand our multi-hop situations that are long running. So what we have here, again, instead of state, we're looking at the volume and velocity of the tickets moving from group to group. And then if we click on this variation analysis, what this looks at is all of the different routes that the work is taking to get to closure. And you can come in here and you can use this filter criteria on the variation analysis to do some filtering on those routes themselves. So you can say, go find me all the situations in which steps are greater than X. In my demo data, that's going to be 4. That will get me the multi-hop scenarios. And then also find me the routes in which there's a little bit of meat on the bone. So records are greater than, in my demo data, I'm going to say 10 and hit apply. And this will show me now the routes that are taking multiple hops, right, and have a little bit of volume to them. And I can see here I've got this one scenario, 26 incidents that went from IT Support Americas to Support IT back to IT Support Americas. And their average duration was 1 month. All right, so there's a lot of time there to go do all those handoffs. But like, where is the time actually being spent? So what you can do is you can click on this, apply, and it will narrow it down to just that route. And you can see here that the tickets are coming in. They go to IT Support Americas. They hang on to them for about a day before they transfer them back to Support IT. Then Support IT is hanging on to them for about 4 weeks before they get it back to IT Support Americas. We now know who's holding on to the tickets the longest in the scenario, and we can start having a conversation in the organization around, hey, do we even need to go to that first level team before we get these types of tickets over to Support IT? Why does Support IT have to pass them back? Maybe we can train up that first team to handle these types of cases, right? Lots of different conversations can be had, but very good way to use Process Mining to help you identify opportunities to streamline processes and reduce the number of transfers of a piece of work. And of course, you can always get to the records. Another thing, or another way to use this data, let's bring it back to something a little bit more manageable. Right, to use the assignment group analysis to look for the long running handoffs or the handoffs that are taking a longer amount of time. And in this case here, you can use the transitions filters again to isolate that data. And you can do something like, show me all the situations where assignment group is anything. And then it's followed by another assignment group is anything. And then we can use that time constraint again and say, show me all the situations in which it's taking longer than a day for a piece of work to move from one team to the other. And again, you can choose your own time periods, but this will now narrow it down to these situations in which I have work that's taking longer than a day to go from one team to another. And then I can start using, again, my variation analysis to say, let's look at those most records, these high volume situations where things are going from one team to another. Let's clear the filters on that. And what I can see here is I've got these 222 that are going from IT support desk level 1 to support Americas, and then that are taking longer than a day for that handoff to take place. In fact, on average, these 222 are taking 4 days for that handoff to take place. And we can drill into those records and continue the analysis, but it helps you get a starting point for looking for where there might be opportunities to improve. So a couple of different ways to do that, or use assignment groups as your activity definition and do some analysis into how work is moving from team to team. All right. Now let's transition over to that on hold reason analysis, and we'll look at two different flavors of this. First, we'll do on hold, and I will tell you right up front, I don't have a lot of data for on hold, so I just created some of my own, a couple of 11 incidents and put them into the on hold state, just so you can see how you might do this type of analysis in your instance. And what we'll do is I'll just expand this out. So you're going to have a flow like this, where you've got things going from new to in progress, but some of that work is going to be going into the on hold state. One of the things, and most common thing to do, is let's just take a look at these things that go into the on hold state and isolate them. Right. And now that I've got the work that goes into the on hold state, maybe we want to create a new filter set that says jumpstart on hold state. Save that. So now we've got a filter set for the things that go into the on hold state. And what we can do is say, okay, I want to understand the impact that things going into the on hold state has on my overall closure time. So you can come over here, use your compare again, and now do a side-by-side analysis of the entire process versus things going into on hold. And you can see the impact from an average duration perspective that on hold might have, or the things that go into on hold might have. Again, once you've got the things in the on hold state, you can start using your breakdowns to better understand the channels or the categories of incidents or tickets or any type of work to go into the on hold state more than others. Let's clear this. We'll close the comparison. The other thing that you can do is you can say, well, use the histogram to say, maybe I only care, or I want to focus in on things that are going into on hold more than once. So we use the histogram to say, let's just focus in on these things that go into on hold more than one time. So apply the filter. And now we'll narrow it down to those things that go into that on hold state more than one time. So just two very simple ways to start getting a better understanding of the work that is going into an on hold state, and then looking for opportunities to reduce the number of times that happens or shorten the amount of time that it sits in the on hold state. Another way to look at this, and this is one of my favorite ways to use process mining, is looking at the on hold reasons themselves. And you can configure a project to do that. And I love this use case because on hold and on hold reason are transient fields, right? Those of you that are familiar, when you set a piece of work to on hold, there's a UI action that pops up that on hold reason field that somebody populates. And the on hold reason value is there while the incident or piece of work is in that on hold state. But as soon as somebody moves it out of on hold, that value goes away, which makes it very difficult to report on your on hold reasons. But because we're using the audit log data in the work itself, or in the incidents, the cases, we're able to use that data for our analysis. It's available to us. So you can configure a project that allows you to start looking at your different on hold reasons. And you can do the same analysis that we were just doing before, where you start saying, well, maybe I only care about things, let's focus in on things that are going to on hold and are awaiting caller. Right? And we can narrow it down to just those situations in which it goes into on hold awaiting caller. Or maybe we want to come in here and we want to look for things that are awaiting vendor. But you might want to build a transition that says something like, hey, let's focus in on situations in which the on hold reason is awaiting vendor, and then directly followed by, let's say, state is anything. But I only care about those situations in which we're waiting vendor for more than, let's say, a week, 7 days, and you can isolate it to just those. So being able to use this on hold reason in your analysis, really, really powerful, and not something that's very easy to do with the traditional reporting that you might be familiar with. In setting this type of project up, we've not done a recording about setting this project up yet as part of this Jumpstart series. So what I wanted to take the time to do now really quickly is just walk you through how you might set something like this up. So we'll create a new project. And we'll call this Jumpstart on hold reason analysis. And we can add a dashboard. I'll just use this one and we'll hit save. And then we'll configure our table, right, that we want to mine, which is going to be our incident table. I'll say incident. We'll pick our table, incident. And of course, we're going to scope the data using our condition builder here. We'll say active is false and just hit preview, and that's good as 40,000. But I've created a subset here for this on hold example. So short description contains, let's say, process mining. I'll just hit preview, and that'll get me to my 11 records that we've been using, and we'll hit save. Now, what we'll do is we're going to add 2 activity definitions. Of course, we're going to add state as our activity definition. But one of the things that we'll want to do to keep the map clean and help us do our analysis a little bit easier is we only want to include certain states, because we're going to be using the on hold reason as an activity. In addition to this, we don't necessarily need the on hold node on the map itself, right? So what you can do is you can use this choose activity values to allow you to start selecting the specific activities that you want to include on the map. And I'm not going to include on hold, because that's just going to make it a little bit muddier, right? So we'll just include these states, but not include my on hold state. And we're going to replace that on hold state with my, I'll say okay, and submit it. We'll replace that with the on hold reason. So we'll come in here, we've now added that, and we'll say new. And we'll add our on hold reason field. On hold reason. And again, we'll choose values, because we don't really want this none value. We only want to include the situations in which on hold has a value. So we'll include those. Great, submit it. And maybe we'll just add a breakdown. I think most everyone here, if you watched the former recordings or been to the prior sessions, you know how to add a breakdown. But let's maybe slice and dice this by assignment group, and we'll hit submit. And at this point, we can be done. We come into our project definition and we hit our mine button. We're not going to include improvement opportunities today. That's it. I wanted to run through that one because it is a unique way to create a project using those 2 on activity definitions of state and on hold reason, and then filtering out certain values from a state and on hold reason perspective. But if I open this up, we'll now have our on hold reason analysis. And you can start looking at how things are going from in progress to that on hold state, but using the specific reasons instead of the on hold box itself, to just get you another level of granularity that you might not have been using before. All right, we ran through a bunch of different stuff. Hopefully that got your juices flowing in terms of different ways that you might want to start using process mining and applying it to different use cases you have in your organization. Just to wrap up with some things here, and I'll get to the questions. If you had questions and you haven't posted them in the Q&A section yet, put them in the Q&A and I'll get to them. So just common question is, okay, this looks great, Dan. Which workflows can we apply process mining to? Well, process mining is available for ITSM, so things like incident, problem, change, request. If you're using our customer or industry workflows, so for customer case, you want to use process mining for that, totally available to do that. If you're using us for HR, a life cycle event or an HR case, you can use process mining there. Field service management, strategic portfolio management, so things like ideas and demands. If you've created your own applications with Creator or App Engine, you can apply process mining to those. And then, as many of you know, as of the Vancouver release, we've opened process mining up to external process data as well via an automation engine entitlement. So if you're interested in any one of those other workflows, you'll notice that I used largely incident data today to drive my demonstrations. It's because it's the best demo data I have. But there are recorded Academy sessions out there for each of those other workflows if you want to get a little bit more contextual information there. So what do you do next? Well, if you haven't already, you want to go out, you want to install the process mining plugin from the store. Instances that you want to install this on, they should be at the pro level or above. We use some of the pro level capabilities inside of the process mining solution itself. So once you have that core plugin installed, there's also content packs out there for the individual workflows. So depending on the workflow you're interested in, you're going to want to install the relevant content pack as well. Some additional resources above and beyond what we covered here today. One, there is a now learning course out there. It's called Process Mining Essentials. So if you're interested in taking that course, it's about 90 minutes self-paced. There's a really good white paper out there on the community site focused on our own ServiceNow process mining journey and some of the initial findings that we had and the use cases we focused on. There's a process mining community forum. So if you go out to community.servicenow.com, there's a specific forum where we post a ton of information. One of the things on that forum is our Process Mining Academy. These are monthly sessions that we do that do deep dives into different areas of the solution. We host them once a month, and they're all recorded out there. So there's about 20 plus sessions recorded out there if you wanted to do deep dives into different areas. There's a use case series. So we just ran through the majority of the use cases that are in that use case series, but in addition to this session, if you wanted a little 5-minute demo recording of each of those individual use cases that we covered, they're out there packaged up in that use case series. And then, of course, if you want to show others or get others exposed to process mining in your organization, there is an online demo available on the community site. If you just search up why and what of in-platform process mining through moving pictures, the overview, presentation, and demo are there. So I mentioned this is the 4th session. If you happen to miss any of the prior sessions, the relevant content or comparable content is posted out there on the community site. So the first session, we did the why and what of process mining. If you search up that demo that I just mentioned on the community site, that'll be equivalent to the first session that we did here. The second session, when we built our first couple of projects, we posted that recording to the Process Mining Academy session 1. So if you search up how does in-platform process mining work and creating your first model, you'll find that recording. And then the last session that we did, session number 3, using the analyst workbench to identify inefficiencies. That recording has been posted to the Process Mining Academy session number 2. So just search up using the analyst workbench to identify inefficiencies, and you'll find the recording of the session right before this one. All right, let's get to your questions. If you've had questions throughout, I hope that you put them in the Q&A, and if there's nothing there, I'll give you a few minutes to put some questions in if you haven't already. Any questions? Not seeing any questions come in. So if there's no questions, we'll just take the time to say thank you very much for your time here today. I appreciate you attending these Jumpstart sessions, and look forward to seeing you on the ServiceNow community in the process mining section. Appreciate your time, everyone, and happy mining.